If Congo turns up, then we'll revert to original programming and do what we're going to do. But that'll be the plan for the moment. Right. So this evening, we're going to do something about do a walkthrough of something called OCOCA, which is how we do terrain analysis. It was one of the methods of doing terrain analysis. OCOCA is a acronym which stands for various different things, which I'm sure you've already looked at the wiki about. But it gives us an idea about how we're going to plan an attack on a position, and it's quite important for us because we're obviously operating with an infantryman's mindset. We're operating quite low to the ground as well. So these things that affect infantry and armed deployments also affect us as well. It can be used for varieties of situations. You don't always have to use it for combat assessments. You can apply elements of this to more peaceful assessment of terrain as well, which may inform when you're selecting landing zones, when you're looking for elements to approach an area from, all sorts of different things. Okay, so it's just a general technique for analysing terrain. OCOCA is used by Western Armed Forces, and it's taught in their military academies as basically a quick fire method of developing both friendly and enemy courses of action. Okay, so we try and work out what the enemy is going to do, and then we base our courses of action on that. So OCOCA stands for Observation and Fields of Fire, Cover and Concealment, Obstacles, Key or Decisive Terrain, and Avenues of Approach. So it's observation, cover, obstacles, key terrain, and avenues of approach. All right, and that's the elements you're looking for. Now, if you look at the screen I'm sharing, we've got a picture of tonight's operational area, and we're going to use this as a kind of like a kind of gentle walkthrough, because some of these elements don't really apply to this, but we can talk about them and why they don't apply. And also, it's a nice flat, chilled out area for you guys to experience this on. Okay, so if we look at this piece of terrain, we've got the target in the middle that we're going for. Okay, this building in the centre of this town, or this group of villages, is what the target is for this mission. Okay, all we need to do is hit that target with chain gun. All right, in order to register a kill on that target. All right, anything given the accuracy of the chain gun, anything within the general vicinity, we're more than happy with. So we need to attack this area, okay? And what we do is we use OCOCA to figure out the best way of doing it, or the factors that are going to influence us and what we're going to look at. Now, in this case, you've got an attack direction which has been forced upon you, which is from the bottom of the picture. So from this is east here, and this is west here.
Right?
Yeah, and so yeah, waypoint 3, and this is waypoint 4 in there. Okay, so that's where you're going to be attacking from. So that's that. That's you're always going to have some. You're always going to have some element of things being forced upon you, in terms of there'll always be something about the terrain that makes you attack from a certain direction. There's always going to be something about working with other squadrons or working with other flights of helicopters that's going to dictate your attack direction. Okay, and this is trying to sort of simulate that in a little bit of a way. So if we look at this image in front of us, we're going to start looking at observation and fields of fire. Now, observation is different from visibility in that observation is related to basically how much of the ground you can see from a given position, whereas visibility is like weather related and time of day related. So they're two different things. You could have good observation but really bad visibility. Okay, so the fields of observation for these settlements are actually really, really good. You can see from most of these positions, you're going to be able to observe the battle space out to a very long distance away, which makes these quite dangerous positions to attack, especially if you're a ground force or you're worried about man pads and things like that, which, spoiler alert, we are tonight. We'll go on in the brief later on, but we are worried about man pads this evening. So right away, we're going to start thinking, okay, well, how are we going to be generating this attack? And because of the fact you've got such wide open fields of fire, and they can see us coming from such a long way, you're potentially then already leaning towards using maybe longer range weapon systems, hanging back, using sensors to assess the target area, these kinds of considerations in order to increase your survivability. All right, bearing in mind that you have to attack this target in the center with chain gun, so you've got to eliminate your threat and then attack the target. Okay, So we've got that consideration. Cover and concealment. Right. This is as flat as a pancake. There is no cover or concealment other than range for your helicopter. So what you can do is you can sit out at the limit of your sensors where you cannot be heard, particularly from the ground, and you can assess the battle space using that. So again, we're starting to look now. Cover and concealment for us is not particularly good. We look at it from the Red Forces side. Cover and concealment's actually not bad at all. You've got obviously all the buildings and the foliage that's sitting around in here. They could hide inside the buildings, etc., etc. You've got this wooded area down to sort of the north that could provide concealment for people. You've got an underpass in here. So the road running from north, I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but the road running from north to south, there's an underpass in there. Okay, and that's something that used to happen in the Iraq War, is that guys would hide under the SA-8s and Rolands would hide underneath bridges. They would drive out, fire a weapon, and drive back under the bridge again, and it would prove very difficult for people to accurately defend against that. Okay, but you've got elements of concealment. Okay, you've got this down here. You've got obviously the buildings, etc., in these areas that are going to potentially cause you problems. All right, in terms of concealment. So you've got to think of the type of force you're facing. In terms of man pads, these things could be anywhere. All right. You will only be facing one set of enemies at a time this evening. There's a scripting set into the mission that will spawn a random enemy position for each attack, so you're not going to get saturated. You're also immortal as well this evening, so if you mess it up, there's no consequence. This is a training exercise, all right? So don't panic at this point. Obstacles, which is your third one, all right? Terrain features that may present obstacles. So for us, obstacles wise, we're not really that worried about this thing. There's a mast over there. Okay, I'm going to suggest that's well out of our way, but it could be a consideration if you're coming off left from the target. But in terms of obstacles to us, we've got freedom of movement in 3 dimensions, so we're happy with that. We can work with that. Obstacles to movement of the enemy. Okay, not really. Other than the fact they're on foot, which may make crossing these big pieces of ground very dangerous for them. Okay, they're not really prohibited from moving around the battle space and deploying themselves. In terms of their deployment and the obstacles to their deployment, I would suggest that these spaces are in fact obstacles to them, simply because you don't want to be sat out in the open. They know that. They're not stupid. They're not going to be sat out in the middle of a field waiting for us. Okay, so that would be an obstacle for them. Other than that, we're doing all right for obstacles. Key terrain, artificial or natural structures which, if controlled, give advantage to one side or the other. So in terms of, again, we're looking at the key terrain are these bits here. Okay, these are the bits that enemy force could deploy themselves into, all right, and cause us problems. So when we're doing our sensor management and when we're doing our assessment of the target, we need to be thinking and we need to be looking at potentially putting sensor points of it or sensor target points around these areas, okay, so that we can snap to these points and assess these points of key terrain. Okay, we don't really sort of care what's going on in here. We don't care because the enemy's not going to be deployed there. All right, we care about these objects or these groups of buildings and terrain that are going to cause us a problem. So that cuts down your scan volume, really, because you're now no longer looking in the middle of all this area. You've got 2 aircraft, realistically, with which to scan 2 sets of key terrain. So you can divide that workload, all right? So 1 aircraft can be scanning over here, 1 aircraft can be scanning over on the south side, 1 aircraft can be scanning over the north side, and you can divide that workload between you and scan those areas of key terrain and ignore everything else at this point because we don't care about it. The enemy's not going to be there, all right? Avenues of approach. This is, sorry, let me just say something about key terrain. It's not necessary to occupy a piece of key terrain in order to control it. it is sufficient for us to deny that key terrain to the enemy. So if we don't need to like land, get out, start shooting people, we can just put ourselves in a situation. Say, for example, with Glimmer's excellent mission the other day, if the enemy is trying to occupy these key pieces of terrain, it's not necessary for us to control that, but it can be necessary for us to stop them from doing that. Okay, so we can place ourselves in positions where we can block or deny access to these elements of key terrain for the enemy, and that's a consideration you've got about how you're going to do that potentially in mission planning. Avenues of approach, okay, for both friendly and enemy movement. Now, in this case, you've got your avenue of approach. You've been given this east to west attack direction that's been stipulated by the constraints of the mission, but you've also got lines of advance for enemy troops around the map. Okay, avenues of approach. Now they could, if they wanted to, just drive straight across the desert. But for the purposes of this exercise, we can see that there are avenues of approach from the west, the south, and the north. So, for example, if we were looking to interdict an enemy force in this area, i.e., intercept it whilst it's moving and attrit that force with either phased or continuous attack, then we would be looking at these avenues of approach and how the enemy may seek to redeploy themselves as part of the battle plan. For example, let's take another example of this. Say, for example, we are supporting an infantry attack that's taking place on this southern settlement from the south. As helicopter pilots, we're going to be focusing both on this southern elements here, okay, but we're also going to be focusing in here, because we're going to be looking for enemy forces that are moving towards the objective area across this avenue of approach from this strong put or this key terrain here to this key terrain here in order to reinforce that position against attack. So you can see now how we start to break down the overall battle space and how we start to assess enemy courses of action and where we need to focus our attention in order to meet our battlefield objectives. Okay. So for this evening, what are we going to be looking at? We're going to be looking at an enemy force that is in and around these areas, okay? In and around these spaces, here and here, all right? And we're going to be attacking from the east. So we're going to be paying particular attention. The enemy aren't stupid, so we're going to be paying particular attention to how they might try and counter our move from the east. So that means we're going to be focusing on faces of the target area, these vertices. Okay, we're going to be looking at these areas. We're not really fussed about the backsides of these at the moment. I've tried to make it simpler than that. We're not going to try and take us out with reverse slope coming off target. We're going to look at the front edges of these because they're going to mount like primary resistance against us. Okay, so this again narrows down our search area for our sensors because we're now simply looking at these vertices or these faces of the target area, okay, for heat signatures of vehicles and personnel. All right. In order to do that, we're going to split. How I would approach it, your mileage may vary, is you would split the engagement area into two halves. We have an advantage in range over the weapon systems the enemy are deploying, okay, and we have an advantage in sensor capability as well. So, in my opinion, how I would tackle this is I would use those advantages in range in order to have one aircraft concentrate on scanning this area from range, perhaps put a sensor point of interest in here for the next attacks so you can snap back to it again, and have one aircraft scanning this area from range, perhaps put a sensor point of interest in there to scan that thing and look particularly at the edges of the town where the enemy may be formulating their positions to attack us. All right. When we attack, we're going to do this in a specific way and we support each other. So we're going to attack as a pair. What you're going to have is you're going to have one helicopter slightly ahead and to the side of the first helicopter. You'll have a shooter and a cover. Apologies for the quality of the lettering. All right. And obviously our attack direction is this way. The shooter is going to focus on the target, so on this point, and the cover is going to be both looking at the shooter but also scanning around in order to ensure that if they take fire, that they are immediately on the radio telling them to brake, and then immediately aggressively engaging that point of resistance. Okay. What I would suggest you do is that you eliminate the threat before you attack. All right. But this part of the top is very, very important, because in real world terms, there could be further threats that you have not seen that you will need to react to. Okay. If we are engaged, say we take fire from an enemy position in here. Excuse me whilst I grab a colour. So we take fire from a position in here. The shooter aircraft should be breaking out, should be getting away from that threat. Okay, there's machine gun fire coming from the enemy position in here. The shooter aircraft is going to break out and get away from that threat. What I would then expect is the cover aircraft to engage that threat with fire in order to destroy that enemy position.
Question.
And then we'll break out left, follow the shooter, and then we will reform and conduct another attack. And we keep then resetting that until we are able to prosecute our overall objective, which is objective 4 in here. Sorry, there was a question. Please go ahead.
What's the distance between the two towns, whatever, villages?
The distance here, oh, not very far. Probably, I mean, just looking at it, we're looking at maybe a kilometre.
So I understand, obviously, if the situation right now would not allow us to attack from the west, right?
Yeah, it's just a contrivance.
Which would be, you know, if let's just say there's like a larger SAM site back there, or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But usually you would attack this from the west if you had the choice.
Yes, I would say that's correct.
But in this case, we have to attack from the east. Would it make sense to say, let's either stay to the left side or to the right side of it, instead of, you know, flying through the both points, which could be a danger to you? Let's lean to either left or right side, which would put us out of range of the other city, right?
So you're absolutely right. If we were forced to attack from this for this exercise, no, I'd like you to attack from waypoint 3 in order to it's just another thing to take off. What I want to see and what I want to get out of this evening is you guys working together to identify an enemy position, destroy that position, and then that shooter cover relationship occurring, and it's for the gunners and the pilots to work out how they should position the aircraft in order to do that. You are absolutely right, though. So you'd run an offset if you were doing this and you had to attack from that position. So you'd probably be attacking from round here,
and
attacking in there, exactly, and then perhaps coming off the target like that to bring it away. What that also does, and you're absolutely correct, is the fact that if you position yourself, so if we're attacking from here, I'd put shooter this side and cover this side, because what's going to happen is as he's looking at the shooter, you're naturally going to look towards the areas of threat as well, rather than having to look. Say, for example, if you do it the other way around, if you do it the other way around and you shoot us here and you covers here, he's now taken out half of that battle space. Okay, he can't see any of this over here anymore. So, yeah, positioning is very, very, very important. You've brought out an excellent point. But for today, please attack from waypoint 3 to waypoint 4, just to simplify things.
And we are
yes.
clear to, like, let's say we make out a manpad in this B village.
Yes.
We would be clear to engage it with a Hellfire.
Absolutely, yeah. Drop a Hellfire on that sucker.
Okay, and of course before the attack run, we don't have to like force ourselves into this position. Okay.
Absolutely not. If you identify a threat, then deal with that threat appropriately between the two of you. Again, use that shooter. So even on a Hellfire run, you will be shooter cover. There still be an aircraft that's going to deliver the Hellfire and an aircraft covering that aircraft as well. So I want to see, that's what we want to generate, is that teamwork, that flow of engaging a target with one aircraft whilst covering it with the second. And then you break out, reset for your attack run, put your cannon rounds in, and you can break out again using, again, shoot a cover, shoot a cover, shoot a cover.
All right.
Okay. Like I said, it's not going to be overly taxing. It will spawn, it should spawn a random, it's on a radio menu item. Okay. So I'm going to control it. So it will spawn one at a time based on a random value, and there are only one. And you are, apart from my aircraft, actually, apart from the Viper aircrafts, they are, everything should be immortal. Are there any questions before we go and start shooting at things? Super. Happy days. In that case, then, we'll jump into the aircraft, we'll get spun up, and Fuhu, you're leading this evening. Happy with that?
Sure.
Any questions as flight lead?
Are we also to simplify it, and I think to make it a little faster, are we clear to engage? Let's say we find a couple of guys with AKs. Are we still allowed to engage them with Hellfire, or should we use the gun for that?
You'll find that when they spawn, they'll spawn as a group. So there'll be a couple of guys with AKs, a truck, and some man pads, just to make it a little bit easier for sensor acquisition. You're clear to engage with whatever weapon systems that you are.
Okay.
Yeah, you're carrying at the time. Cool. All right. See you in the aircraft channel.